Joining us now, Chris Rosvoglu from Boot Crew Media covering the Saints. Chris, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well.
All right, let's give me your reaction to the trial date now being set. Alvin Kamara pleads not guilty along with three others today. The trial date set in Las Vegas, a jury trial for July 31st. This is after camp will have started, but still well in advance of the season, in time for the league to rule on this before the Saints get started. What do you think the Saints' reaction to this will be from a personnel standpoint?
Honestly, I think from a personnel standpoint, before today, the Saints were probably under the assumption anyway that they would need to really upgrade this backfield, because even if you take Alvin's situation out of the equation, they would need another running back in there after seeing, how little depth they had. But I think with this news coming in, I think it should be further confirmation that if the Saints want to really, maximize their offense this upcoming season and really boost the backfield in the offseason, I think you kind of take an approach where act like you don't have a running back at all right now. And yes, you will get Alvin back, I'd imagine, at some point if he were suspended, and that would be great. But, if you miss him for 6 games, 8 games, whatever it could potentially be, man, that'd be devastating, because who are you going to lean on? So I think if you are New Orleans, you're looking at free agency. You're definitely looking at this year's draft class. And I think you're looking for a running back that can take a larger workload on from the jump, and hopefully that doesn't transpire for just next season, but for the seasons to follow, because Alvin also is getting a little bit up there in age. But either way, I'd look at the situation where, man, it's a dire need at running back.
If you held Mickey Loomis down and said, give me your absolute best guess as to what's going to happen with Kamara from I'm not asking him to predict what the court's going to do, but what the league is going to do. What do you think the organization believes that they are facing with Kamara and the time he will have to be away?
I would imagine they believe he's going to get suspended. In terms of, what's the amount of games. There's been different theories floated out there. Some people have said as little as 4. Some people have said as many as 8. So, I try to meet in the middle and say, if I'm the Saints, I expect him to miss, let's say, anywhere between 4 to 8 games. And I think that it was almost a relief early last season when you were like, okay, this thing's getting pushed back. He's not going to get suspended. And now looking at the way the whole year transpired, you're almost like, okay, it would have almost been a benefit to the team had the suspension happened last year as opposed to this year. But I think that between the alleged details of what's happened, the videos that have come out over the last month, and now that it will go to trial, like you said, in late July, I'd be shocked if they're not expecting to miss Alvin for a certain amount of time.
Any chance that he doesn't play at all?
I would be a little bit surprised by that. I think that, when we look at recent history, not the same situation, but I remember when Ezekiel Elliott had, a looming suspension on and off, and eventually ended up being, I believe, 6 games, and he ended up eating that suspension and taking it as it was, but it got pushed back for a while. But I would be surprised, considering just the overall length of the season and the fact that, the way it's been handled. I think if the NFL was going to have a situation where Alvin would have missed a really extended period of time, like what you're alluding to there as a hypothetical, I kind of feel like that would have happened already. There would have been maybe a harsher reaction last year after it happened, because, it has been over 12 months since this incident occurred. So I would be a little stunned by that.
Let's move on to Derek Carr. Saints and Carr meeting again. He's met with the Panthers. He's met with the Jets. He's been to New Orleans. They have met in New Orleans. They have met in Indianapolis. There was some conversations between them in between those two visits. Chris, if the Saints and Derek Carr were dating, somebody would have asked, hey, are you guys ever going to get married? Or are you just going to break up? So I don't know what else they could learn about each other at this point, other than this just looks like a contract negotiation to me. Where are you on Derek Carr and the Saints?
Yeah, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think the way I look at it for Derek Carr's situation is bearing, another team entering this sweepstakes, and at the very little kind of just raising the price for Derek Carr, not just for that team, but for the Saints. It's at the point where there's nothing else the Saints can really do right now unless outbid themselves. If the Jets were going to make an offer that was going to wow Derek Carr and also be the right fit for him, I think they would have done that already, but I think deep down they want to wait for Aaron Rodgers and see what happens there. As for the Panthers, just listening to Frank Reich and how he speaks, you can see the difference in where teams are at because the Panthers seem okay with, re-signing Sam Darnold and then drafting a quarterback. They don't seem like, Derek Carr is plan A, plan B, and plan C all in one. And then you look at how the Saints have approached this situation. They've already met with him twice. They were the first team to even get a visit in prior to him getting released. And I think the Saints know what he can do schematically for their system. Dennis Allen obviously has a connection there. And the Saints have made it pretty evident between what Mickey Loomis has said to the media, but also I'd imagine what was said during their face-to-face meetings, that he's the guy that they want under center for 2023. And it really is no one else for them. It's actually reached that point where when you think of if they were to miss on Carr, what would happen next? There's a little bit of unknown because the Saints have been so adamant about wanting him. So I think for this, it comes down to between today and March 13th, when the negotiation period kind of opens up for other teams. I think maybe Derek Carr and his camp are waiting for another team to enter the fray and maybe raise the price. But other than that, I think there's many reasons that would lead to the Saints being the favorites right now.
Is this similar to the situation a year ago with Deshaun Watson, where they went as far as they could go from a money standpoint, draft pick standpoint, got the owner involved, everything was in there, they made their best pitch, and when they didn't get him, it was kind of like, oh, man, okay, Andy Dalton, I guess. Is it going to be that again this year? Is there, like you said, there is no plan B? Derek Carr's the guy they want. Derek Carr's the guy they're going all in on. Derek Carr's going to get their best offer. If he goes somewhere else, it's going to be, all right, Andy Dalton.
I would say if it plays out that way, it definitely feels similar. Where I think it's a little bit different here is I think from the Saints, if Derek Carr wasn't interested in them, I don't think he would have taken one, let alone two visits with them. So I think that's a good thing that they have going there. Whereas for the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes last year, it was so interesting because you would hear all these reports about who met with him, but you never heard kind of a thing from Deshaun Watson's camp. And then when he ended up getting that deal from the Browns, it kind of makes sense why it happened because no other team was going to do what they did with fully guaranteeing that contract like Cleveland. So from the Saints' perspective, if it is a little bit of money, right, and let's say Derek Carr were to get a couple $1 million more from, let's say, the Jets, and he really wanted to go to the Saints, we can tell the Saints that the Saints can be probably more than willing to either match that offer or find a way to wiggle out some more space to make a deal happen. So I think that there's definitely, I don't want to say more margin for error, but I think that the Saints have a way better likelihood now with the Derek Carr situation than they did with Watson because, everyone talks about the Browns deal, but even if Watson didn't go there, I kind of felt like the Falcons kind of leapfrogged the Saints in the sweepstakes at that time too. So I do think the disappointment would be similar if they do miss out on Derek Carr. But I think right now there isn't that huge concern of, hey, what if another team comes over the top right now? I think the options that Derek Carr has, they haven't really changed. I don't really expect them to change at this moment. And it's really just going to come down to if his camp says, hey, look, the offers aren't getting any better, so let's just make our pick before other guys are available.
When Cleveland guaranteed 100% of that salary, 31 other owners in the league started audibly cursing loudly because that deal completely threw the market. Nobody more than Steve Bisciotti in Baltimore, because the Deshaun Watson contract, in my opinion, it's what's holding up the Lamar Jackson contract. It's not the amount of money. It's the amount of guaranteed money. And Jackson wants 100% guaranteed like Cleveland gave Watson. And Baltimore's like, no, Cleveland is the only team in the league that did that. We're not doing that for a guy who's started and finished only one game in December and January the last 2 years. So that Watson you may be very right about the Falcons, but if the Falcons had gotten him, I don't think it would have been the 100% guarantee. I think that was the hammer that nobody else was willing to go, and Cleveland decided that they would completely throw off the market for quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the Lamar thing, and that's where it's fascinating, too, because that definitely is playing a factor right now. And people have said, hey, look, he might get 5-year $250 from the Ravens, but fully guaranteeing a contract of that nature is just, absolutely absurd in today's NFL. But I think it's really fascinating. And you mentioned Lamar. I think that's another reason why Derek Carr over the next 10, 11 days, you have to make a decision quick because eventually Rodgers becomes potentially available. If not, maybe Jordan Love becomes available. Lamar will probably get the franchise tag, and then the Ravens have to make a decision on him. And if he were up for grabs, that's another spot that will potentially take away from Derek Carr. So it is really fascinating how, over the last 2 years, the NFL has changed where I felt like we didn't get a lot of quarterback movement, and now it feels like there's at least 4 to 5 big names that could change year to year. It's pretty interesting.